our lives and change us. Lord, soften our hearts, make us receptive to the words of the Scripture. Lord, let me speak with your mouth and with your authority, not my own. God, that we would listen and obey what we have here tonight. So, Lord, we pray your blessing upon this time, and just pray that you get the glory from all that comes of it. And we pray this in your name. Amen. All right. Here we go. So last week we dealt with Samson's parents and the story of how Samson's birth was prophesied and kind of had these commandments given to this couple, Manoah and his wife, who scripturally went unnamed, in setting forth and kind of setting the stage for this one who would come and how did the Bible describe what Samson would do?
What was the question?
How does the Bible describe what Samson would do with the child of Manoah and his wife? Yes, begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Correct. And so that's all set up, and we see that Samson, grows up, and that the Spirit of the Lord began to stir in him, began to incite him to do things. And so Samson's an adult now. He's been born. We've progressed into his adulthood, and so now we're going to see kind of what Samson was like. Now that he's grown, and it's it's a thing. Gak, I've posted a link right in the chat, so you can click on that. It'll take you right to the passage. So let's just get going with Samson. Let's go ahead and read the first 3 verses of Judges chapter 14. If someone would take those for us.
You want me to read it?
Yep, go for it.
Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Then he came up and told his father and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. But his father and mother said to him, Is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all our people that you must go to take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. Ooh, that's a mistake.
All right. Thank you.
That's my own words, by the way. That's a poor life choice. This coming from a guy who took life skills in high school, and that's a special ed class. Okay, that's aside.
All right. So we have Samson who goes down to the city of Timnah. Now, Timnah was a bit to the south of Israel, and it was presumably, from the sound of it, a city that belonged to the Philistines. And so Samson ends up down there, and he's looking around, and he sees this woman, and he's like, ooh. And he's kind of smitten by her, and he looks at her. And so he goes back to his parents and says, hey, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines down at the city in Timnah. And it sounds weird to us to say that he asked his parents, now you go get her for me as my wife. Why would Samson make that request of his parents? Why wouldn't he go do it himself? You want a woman? Go get her yourself. Why would Samson ask his parents to do this? I'm going to let Wise Rat put in his 2 cents, and then we'll get it. Yes. So culturally, what happened was it was up to the parents of the groom or the groom-to-be to pay a dowry to the bride's family in order to acquire her as a wife. And that was typically done by the parents. So this isn't strictly an arranged marriage. but it is one where, following the cultural uh, norms of the day, the parent would go and, like I said, pay that dowry to acquire this young lady as Samson's wife. That makes sense? Yeah, there's still places that do this. It hasn't completely died out. We've kind of the Western world has moved away from it, but in a lot of Eastern or Oriental cultures, in certain places in the Middle East still, this is still a thing that happens. We're just desensitized because America.
For some reason, an Asian city comes to mind.
Oh, I'm sure there are probably plenty. All right,
Definitely not Japan.
so that's what's happening here. Um, Samson's not being like a chicken, like, oh, I can't talk to women. I need my parents to do this for me. No, this is just cultural. That's all it is. Now, verse 4 is interesting. Or actually, before I jump too far ahead, I love Samson's parents' response. He's like, go down here. And instantaneously, they're like, whoa, 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 son, hold up, hold up. You went down to a Philistine city, saw a Philistine woman, and like, hey, I want her as my wife. And they say, is there no one among our family or our tribe or anyone in Israel that you could take? Which, to be fair, is a very reasonable question, because the very last line in verse 4, which we'll get to, is, at that time the Philistines ruled over Israel. That's a good positive note to start this marriage on, or his request for marriage at the very least. And just to kind of nail the point home, I mean, the Israelites, when they were reading this story, probably during the reign of kings and after, they would have known that the Philistines, there's like, ooh, boo, Philistines, we don't like them. They're bad, kind of enemies of Israel for a while. Manoah and his wife throw in this little extra line. He says, among all of our people, that you must go take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know, but the idea of being uncircumcised, whenever a Jew, or an Israelite in this case, calls someone uncircumcised, that's not a term of endearment. That is, strictly put, kind of contemptuous. Um, it's like these people who are not chosen, these these heathen foreigners, these people that God has rejected in favor of us. And I make it sound more prideful than it is, but it was a matter of national identity. And so what his parents are doing is they're saying, look, you could choose of any of the women of here in Israel, but instead you go to these people that are foreigners. And not only that, they are currently ruling over us, and you want one of them to dilute our Israelite household. You can kind of see how the response of Samson's parents is justified here. This isn't even taking into the fact that the Philistines worshipped other gods that were not the God of the Jews or the God of the Israelites, Yahweh. And so there's a lot at work here, and Samson's parents are right to be a little concerned. Now we're going to take a look at verse 4, and I'm going to let you guys tell me what you think it means before we go any further. So here's verse 4. I'll go ahead and read this one. His father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. And at that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel.
That makes a bit of sense. He's being
All right.
tactical with his marriage thing.
All right. So tell me what you guys think. There's a bit to unpack there. What sticks out to you about verse 4?
I'm guessing like we're led to think that at first it's like Samson just making a poor life choice here, but then verse 4 is like, no, 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 this is just the Lord being tactical. I mean, I don't know if tactical is the right word, but hey, I mean, enlighten me.
Okay. All right.
We're doing a little bit of real time strategy, RTS. Okay.
Wise Rat doing a little bit of typing. We'll see if he gives us a novel or. Oh. Oh. Okay. Wise Rat answering a question with a question. Does the translation really say from the Lord? Or is this the Lord hardening Pharaoh's heart syndrome? Okay. Not answering that yet,
Well, I mean,
but
it's the
I
ESV
see
version.
what you're writing there. Anything else sticking out to you guys? Well played, Kess. Yeah, there's a lot we can look at and take from what we have preconceived notions and plug and play into this verse, but just strictly looking at the passage, what can we take out of it? Exactly. Well done. So, like I said, there's a lot to unpack here. And a lot of it comes from the way that the verse is translated from the original Hebrew back into English. Um, so the first thing, Wise Rat picked up on it real quick. In English it says his father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord. What is actually being oh shoot, the word just left me. Insinuated, I suppose. That's not the word I was after, but it'll work. Is that this this is God working through the actions of Samson's? Implied. That's the word. Thank you, Cass. Implied. God did not command Samson to marry a Philistine. That would have not have been the plan, because remember, so much of Samson's buildup in the previous chapter, pretty much so much of that was talking about how Samson was going to be the first lifelong Nazirite. He was set apart, sanctified for a holy purpose from his birth till the day he died. It would have been very controversial for a man with that kind of pedigree to go and marrying a Philistine with the blessing of God on that. Yes. Yep. God even states on other occasions, don't intermarry with the Canaanite. And here, what's Samson doing? He's like, I want to marry a Canaanite. So no, this is not God's command or even God. This is not something that God willed. However, when it says it was from the Lord, what it means is that this is God putting to use something that is not necessarily condoned. There's a person who within our community who has been known before to make the wonderful statement, God never wastes a bad situation. And this is what God's doing here. He says, okay, we can use this. I like that. Is that the same person that says that, Cass? Wrenching good out of evil?
No, that's Dorothy Sayers.
Oh, fine. I could see Ginger saying it, though. All right. So that's the first thing. So good job, Wise Rat, picking up on that. The next part is more kind of translation. Because here in English, we see, his father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord. And then the next phrase is, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. Question, who's he? Got a little quiet in the chat. Okay. Kess says, always
Sorry, are we
assumed
talking about
he
his wife?
was God. No. We're still in verse 4. It says that for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. So who is he referring to?
I'm gonna assume it's safe to say it's Samson.
All right. So we have a few votes for Samson.
I mean, why would the Lord want to go out with a girl? I mean, it sounds like dating or something like that.
No. When he says go out against the Philistines, he means that he wanted to go to war to start something with them. You want to fight, bro?
I mean, well, what I'm trying to say is, like, for Samson to say, "Hey, I want that girl. I want to go out with her. I want her to be my wife or something like
Mm-hmm.
that." And then if you were to say that he is representing the Lord, and it's like, okay, why is the Lord marrying a Philistine woman? That doesn't sound right.
It's
So if I,
not the
it has to
translate.
square with
We can talk about that. The translation there. Let's stay on top. So,
I'm just explaining it
so
here
a
for
couple of
my.
people saying Samson, a little bit for God. So the answer is, text isn't clear enough, really. Strictly speaking, the text itself does not give enough clues as to who the he actually is. That being said, I think that just looking for me, if we look at some evidence and some context, the picture becomes a bit clearer. For instance, we see that Samson is, admittedly wanting to marry this Philistine woman. Now, could that have been part of a larger plot? Absolutely. And that if it is, it's one of the most devious things I've ever seen. But we know from one chapter ago that God has already placed this, this next judge, Samson. He's already ordained him to begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. And so we already know that God's been planning this. And so what I see here is that I would tend to lean towards the side that says that this is God. The Lord is what he is referring to. He was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines, which again, when you consider that we're talking about God, as Kess said, wrenching good out of evil, that just lines up perfectly with that. So I would tend towards the side that says, this is that he is referring to God. Now, can't say that with any certainty. And to be fair, we often say, why not both? It's possible here. It feels unlikely. But I think both sides could be possible. I also don't think Samson had a real huge reason to do this yet. But again, we'll tackle that. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because we know how things, roll with me. Oh, it's almost 9:30. Awesome. I am 4 verses in. Okay. Let's go ahead and take the next 3 verses 5 through 7. Someone wants to read those.
I'm like willing, but I don't want to be with a guy hogging up all the space.
Well, nobody else is volunteering. Oh, hang on. All right, Kess, you may go ahead.
5 to 7.
Mm-hmm.
Then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah. And behold, a young lion came toward him roaring. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion in pieces as one tears a young goat. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes.
Okay. Okay. These 3 verses are ridiculous. So, a few things. The verse 5, I read some things that talk about, where was the addition where they're talking about Samson going down with his parents down to Timnah. Is that an addition or something? I'm not going to get into that. That's kind of aside from the point and just kind of the minutia. And you know how I feel about, dabbling or focusing on the minutia. It's not the big deal. What is the big deal is we skim over this. We talk about going to Timnah, and we're often quick to be like, "Oh, he took on a lion and took it to town." No, we skip over the very first part, which I think could be significant. Where are Samson and his parents going?
Down to Timnah.
Yes, specifically where in Timnah? The vineyards. Vineyards. Okay. Why is that? Why would that be significant? I'm not so much thinking of later events as I might be thinking of prior events, Kess. Oh, bingo! Kess has nailed it. Yes, part of being a Nazarite means you can't. Samson's mother, while she was burying him, and couldn't have anything that came off the vine. And part of the Nazarite vow is you were forbidden for the time that you were Nazarite to not have anything from the vine. Nothing grape, no wine, nothing. Oh, Dodge, you're wide open. Thanks, sir. Or thank you. I'm just presuming that was Kess that jumped in on it. But yeah, no grapey stuff. And so where do we see Samson ending up here? In the vineyards! So we see Samson, we're in like 7 verses. And he's already making severe problematic life choices based with the life that he was set apart to behave in accordance with. Now, to be fair, it does not say that Samson partook of any of the grapes or like had any wine or anything. It doesn't say that, so it's hard to be dogmatic and say, "Oh, Samson was completely in the wrong." But at the same time, if you're a Nazarite, why are you going to a vineyard? It's just putting Samson. Samson has this penchant. We're going to see it through the next few chapters. He has this like incurable, insatiable penchant for putting himself in a bad situation. It's just a situation where there's tremendous potential for problems, and this is just one of the early ones. And so, now we're down in the vineyards. We're just there, and Samson suddenly gets attacked by a lion. And so, first thought, I could see that being a problem. Now, some people would say, well, there aren't any lions in Israel. Well, not now, but there are numerous stories in the Bible about people dealing with lions. King David, well, he was a shepherd. He killed a lion. And so lions were not unheard of in this area. And we have this lion just jumping out and being like, fresh meat. And, well, Samson's like, nah, fam. So it says the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. Ooh. Oh, that's some good writing there. It rushed upon him. It just like, it like whoosh. It's like I don't know that there's a better word than rush. It's like just strict spiritual adrenaline. And God enabling Samson to do supernatural things. So Samson reaches out, grabs the lion, and just tears it apart. Now, I don't know. I looked. Got my Bible. I look. I motion with my hands as I'm teaching. So if you hear stuff fall over, that's probably because I'm getting too animated. I know you guys can't see me. Just imagine me going nuts. It's a thing. I forgot what I was talking about. Oh, it talks about as one tears a young goat. I looked at a number of commentaries and people kind of leaving their remarks in this passage, and they're like, not entirely sure how one tears a young goat. But apparently it was something that the Israelites, the people that would have been reading this, understood, and it was meant to be really easy. So then it says that he didn't tell his father or mother what he did. So Samson's the only guy who knows what's happened with his line. He's like, cool, that was fine, and just kind of going about his business. That's possible, Cass. Like some people did comment and said, maybe it was a cooked goat. Could have been the insinuation. Tough to say. So then Samson goes down and talks with this woman, and we kind of see the fulfillment, to Samson at least, of what he said back in the first few verses, that that she was right in his eyes. Now let's kind of see the second half of the story with the lion. I knew the crock pot was going to come. Can someone take verses 8 and 9 here?
I guess I will if nobody wants.
All right. I don't see anybody else speaking up. It's all yours, Gak.
After some days he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion and honey. He scraped it out into his hand and went on, eating as he went. And he came to his father and mother and gave some to them, and they ate. But he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey from the carcass of the lion. Why do
All right.
something's like going warning something, like the
A little bit. So the thing that there are a few things that people don't necessarily, or there's an insinuation here that doesn't translate well into English, and I think we get caught up in that, and it makes this seem utterly ridiculous. So first off, it should be noted that bees are, within the realm of nature, tremendously clean creatures. And whenever they make a hive or make a home, it tends to be in a very clean, very open area where there's not a lot of obstruction, or especially not anything decaying. And so when we read that there's honey, that these bees have made a honeycomb in the carcass of this lion, we're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Say what? The Bible says it was some days later that he goes to get her, and he checks out the carcass, and the bees have made a honeycomb in the midst of this carcass. What's going on? So in English, the problem is that for me at least, especially, I know this is true with me. When I see the word "some," I think, oh, we're probably talking somewhere between like, I don't know, 5 to 12. You know, that's like what I imagine some being. That's some things I have anywhere between 5 and a dozen. I have some of them. Any more than that, we start getting into many territory. But in this case, some does not mean like 2 weeks. Some days could be a rather like quite a period of time. Courtship or preparation for a marriage from the initial meeting between the man and woman could have been up to a year. It's not really clear how long this was, but it was likely to be over a month, possibly several months after the fact that this has happened. Now, also consider we're talking about the Middle East. And the Middle East is known for a few things, but one of which is, being very hot, very dry. And so a carcass of a dead animal would not take long to completely decompose in that heat until it was literally just bones. And wouldn't you believe it, the word here for carcass actually can mean skeleton. Yeah. So what is actually happening here is that Samson has gone down to get this woman again and to bring her back to have this marriage, to have the wedding feast. And on his way down, he remembers, oh yeah, I killed a lion. And he goes and is like, let's see what happened. Let's go take a look at this memorial where this cool thing happened. And he's like, oh, there's a beehive within the bones, which again, bones don't decay the same way that flesh does, and so the bees would not be deterred by that, and so they would have been okay making a honeycomb there. It's been noted in other places that bees have taken up residence within the skeleton of other creatures, so this falls perfectly in line with the behavior. So I know I know this is weird to be talking about in a Bible study. But again, I did say at the outset that this is a lot of cultural and understanding of kind of the times and the nature of the region. A lot of things that would have been more understood by those dwelling in that time than necessarily looking for principles to draw out from Scripture in the 21st century. Speaking of which, oh, it's nothing terrible. Just 20 minutes till 10. We're good. All right. All right. So let's start talking. Thank you, Cass. Let's get someone to read verses 10 through 14. Also, before we do that, right at the end of verse 9, note that Samson seems aware that what he's doing is questionable, because remember, a part of a Nazirite vow is you can't touch a dead body either, and he just took honey out of a skeleton. So he seems aware that he's already in kind of iffy territory, because you'll note that he gives his parents some of the honey, which is great, but he doesn't tell them where he got it from, because he knows that if they find out, that's not something he should be doing.
Wasn't there like a Half-Life to decay and stuff? Yes, I just made 2 Half-Life references. Here,
We're going to stay on topic here.
I know. I'm trying to have fun with this, but I also meant that literally.
Well,
punning.
I don't want to keep people here an unduly amount of time, which I tend to. So
Like, there wouldn't be
I
any-
almost glossed over that. But yeah. So again, Samson making questionable choices. just can't. Oh, remember what I said last week about how I wish that the attitude and the characteristic of Samson's parents would have passed on a bit more to their kid? Yeah, we're kind of seeing that now. Okay, seriously. Someone take verses 10 through 14.
I'll take initiative again if I have to. Oh, never mind.
Oh, thank you, Wise Rat.
His father went down to the wood. Samson prepared a feast there, so the young men used to do. As soon as the people saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Samson said to them, "Let me now put a riddle to you. If you could tell me what it is within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. But if you cannot tell me what it is, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes." And they said to him, "Put your riddle that we may hear it." And he said to them, "Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet." And in 3 days they could not solve the riddle.
Whew. Okay. So now we're actually getting down to the wedding feast. So there's a few cultural things that are odd here. For one, typically, when you would have a wedding feast, it would be held in the groom's hometown. But in this case, we see it being held not in Samson's hometown, but down in Timnah, where the bride's from. It's just something to note. And so we see Samson preparing a feast, and we know we've seen it before. We've talked about weddings, these marriage feasts during biblical times. That they weren't just this party you have in the afternoon like we have over here. These things went days. Now, one thing that one commentator did point out, it says that Samson prepared a feast there, for so the young men used to do. When we talk about feasts or weddings, oftentimes something that comes up, or another wedding, famous wedding that comes up, is the wedding at Cana from the Gospels, where Jesus turns the water into wine. Automatically, you should see a problem. We're at a wedding feast with a Nazarite, where there will be wine. Oh, Samson. Oh, what are we going to do with you?
Sorry, y'all. Are we on 10 to 14?
Oh, good. Unger said that the judges get worse as you go, and now that we're here, it's like, goodness, we see the downward descent. Oh, it's rough. It's rough. Okay. There was some discussion about the idea of when Samson, when they see Samson, what these 30 companions were. Were these guys like bodyguards? Was Samson so intimidating? They're like, oh, there's a big guy. Or who were these guys? I don't know that I have a clear answer. But these guys were certainly Philistines. They're 30 Philistine men. So Samson says to these 30 guys, he's like, hey, let me give you guys a riddle. And to be fair, there are other examples in scripture of men riddling with each other. Solomon would they're maybe not scriptural, but there are documents of Samson posing riddles with other kings. and of other individuals during this time frame that were within a wedding feast, wagers or bets would be made based upon a riddle going from one party, typically the groom, to the groomsmen or another grouping where one could attain great wealth or increase their wealth based upon the outcome of who could solve the riddle or not. Yeah, that's what I thought. I saw Solomon doing riddles. I'm like, I'll pass on that. So Samson says, "Hey, I got a riddle for you guys. And here's the thing, we'll make a wager. So if you guys can't get it, then I'm going to need 30 garments and 30 changes of clothes from you guys. But if you guys guess the riddle and are able to tell me what it is, then I'll give all of you guys, or one to each of you, 30 garments and 30 changes of clothes. What do you think?" And they're like, "Okay, there's 30 of us, and you've got one riddle. Surely we can put our heads together and figure out whatever riddle you've got." Okay? It is an incredible amount of wealth because these aren't just typical garments. These are going to more than likely be something nice and fancy, something very, we have this term here in the West, your Sunday best. This is kind of the idea, something you would wear to a special occasion, something kind of showy to make yourself look important or look fancy or something. That's kind of what we're talking about. Yeah, so it is very fancy. So he says, "Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet." Now we, as kind of the omniscient viewers, automatically know what he's talking about. We know that he's talking about the honey that came out of the carcass of the lion that he killed. That's obvious. But remember, Samson hasn't told anybody about this. His parents don't know. This girl he's marrying doesn't know. Nobody knows. All his parents know is that, hey, Samson had honey that one time. So Samson gives this riddle thinking, hey, I'm perfectly safe. Nobody has a clue what I'm talking about. I'm gonna increase my wealth over these guys, and it's gonna be great. Yeah, that's an important thing to say too, Cass, and that's going to come into play here in a minute. So it says in 3 days, these guys couldn't figure out the riddle. Now remember, the wedding feast is 7 days long. So they've already used up half their time and have gotten nowhere. 30 guys. And so after 3 days, you're probably like, oh man, like Cass said, if I've only got one garment and I'm going to have to give it to Samson if I can't get this riddle, oh man, what are we going to do? So gradually they become more and more frantic and more panicked. And so they decide to take some desperate measures. So with that in mind, can I have someone read verses 15 through 18?
You want me to do it?
I'll give you a break. If nobody else will do it, then I'll just go ahead and read.
I mean, I'm willing. I'm trying
I've-
not to hog all the space.
I'm okay with taking this one.
You sure?
Oh, unless Cass wants to take this one. You may.
15 through 18.
Mm-hmm.
On the 4th day they said to Samson's wife, "Entice your husband to tell us what the riddle is, lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us here to impoverish us?" And Samson's wife wept over him and said, "You only hate me. You do not love me. You have put a riddle to my people, and you have not told me what it is." And he said to her, "Behold, I have not told my father nor my mother, and shall I tell you?" She wept before him the 7 days that their feast lasted, and on the 7th day he told her, because she pressed him hard. Then she told the riddle to her people, and the men of the city said to him on the 7th day, before the sun went down, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" And he said to them, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle."
this passage. Oh my gosh. Okay, this story gets so ridiculous. So remember where we're at. Remember what's happening here. The grand story is that Samson's getting married. He is at a wedding feast, which is supposed to be a time of celebration and joy and partying and woo. Even though he's a Nazarite, we're going to set that to the side. This is supposed to be happy. And Samson has posed a riddle, and these Philistines are so upset about being one-upped by some Israelite, this guy that their nation has subjugated. They're like, we're gonna be put out of, we're gonna be, put into poverty because we can't solve this riddle from this one Israelite. We're gonna look like idiots, apart from being poor. And so, like, okay. Let's go and get hold of this girl that Samson's marrying, because if anybody's going to have an in to figure out what this riddle is, maybe she can use her feminine wiles to get Samson to tell her. And the more that time presses on, you see them getting more desperate, because finally they come to her. And there's some debate over the translation of the days, the numbers. It's, again, not getting caught up in the minutia. They come to her and say, "Listen, you got to find out what this riddle is. Because if you don't, we're going to come to you and we're going to burn you and all your household with fire." Yeah, this is turning out to be the happiest wedding ever. Nothing like telling the bride that you're going to set her on fire. That's, no, Farmer Gal. Oh. But yeah, this is certainly turning out great. Absolutely great. So, suddenly feeling a tremendous amount of pressure, Samson's wife, or she goes to him and says, "Listen, she's pulling out all the stops. You hate me. You tell me. I just want to know." And Samson's like, "I didn't tell my parents. Why should I tell you? Technically, the marriage isn't fully consummated yet. Not until after the 7th day. We're technically not even husband and wife. Why in the world would I tell you before my own parents?" But she just piles it on and just nags him so much. Finally, he's like, "Oh my gosh, woman, shut up." Yes, that's an excellent point to bring up, Cass. Samson, now, to be fair, at this point, Samson isn't really known as the strongman, because his real claim to fame so far, or his greatest feat, is this riddle that nobody knows about. And there's some things that are insinuated, and we'll get into this in future weeks. That I'll give you a little spoiler now. With Samson and Delilah, the Philistines come to Delilah and say, "Can you find out the source of Samson's strength?" If Samson was a huge and burly and muscly guy, you wouldn't need to ask that. You'd probably have a pretty good idea of where his strength comes from, because the dude's like biceps bulged out like a freaking tree. But if you're trying to find out where his strength comes from and it's not obvious, what does that say? That maybe Samson didn't appear to be the hulking brute that we often portray him as. Food for thought. But that's we'll deal with that more in the future. So it says that she wept and was crying and was mascara running down. And Samson was just like, fine, I'll tell you, just leave me alone. Which is a great thing to say to your wife to be. And he finally told her because she pressed him so hard. And then she, with a fairly legitimate reason, but still, he, oh gosh, she could have come to him. There is so much that's in play here because she's a Philistine, he's an Israelite, and the Philistines come to the Philistine bride and tell her, "We're going to kill you if you don't find out this riddle." And her option is, well, Samson could help me with this, but then I'd be betraying my own people to the guys that we've currently subjugated, so I can't do that. So I'd rather betray my husband and then and save my own life by giving the secret to my people. And there's just so much happening here. And this is a wedding, people. This is so nuts. This is just goofy. And then, this is the part that got me that I'd never really known. Because the Bible does a really good job of letting you know when suddenly we break into prose or poetry or kind of a proverb, because it starts doing this weird indentation job. You can see it in your passage. So when Samson gives the riddle, it's written out in prose. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. And so the Philistines, once they have the answer, try to form the riddle or form the answer in such a way that it appears as prose to make it look like they actually figured it out instead of totally cheating. Because again, when it comes to the response, there it is in that indentation. It says, what is sweeter than honey? And what's stronger than a lion? And so they're like, hey, we're clever. We figured it out. We didn't have any help. It's fine. And Samson's like, are you even kidding me right now? He's not fooled at all. He already knows what the deal is. And he uses this line that we kind of misinterpret, but it's still possibly the funniest part of this entire passage. He said, if you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle. And it's... Oh, man. So he's not calling his wife a cow. Okay, let's get that out of the way. What he's talking about when he uses this is a proverb. Not like from the book of Proverbs, but this was just a saying they had back in the day, plowing with the heifer or plowing with, perhaps more accurately, the ox. Because a pair of oxen were commonly used to plow and till a field. Kind of turn up the ground, make it ripe for farming. And that's what he's insinuating. He says, you guys didn't do the work on your own. You got help to help turn up, as in the ground, the hard ground for farming, to turn up, to dig up the answer. And he said, you used something that belonged to me, my wife, to get the answer. So that's what Samson's actually saying here. But admittedly, the way it comes out is super funny. By the way, in the Western culture, especially within this the time that we live, I would not recommend using this phraseology out in public. Do not go around using, if you plowed with my heifer, that will probably not get you real far. Okay, so the Philistines do not solve the riddle, but they get the answer. And so now Samson has a choice. He can either not honor his agreement with the Philistines and not give them the stuff because technically they cheated, or he can give them the 30 garments. or the 30 pairs of garments, like the garments and the change of clothes. Yeah. So let's finish off the chapter with verses 19 and 20 to find out how he deals with this.
Can I read?
Yes, you may.
And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and struck down 30 men of the town and took their spoil, and gave garments to those who had told the riddle. In hot anger he went back to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his companion who had been his best man.
Okay. So let's go back again to verse 4. Talking about Samson wanting to marry this Philistine woman. And so his father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. And here we have the reason why I think he was talking about God. Because again, God's squeezing good out of evil. Nothing, very little God pleasing has come out of this entire chapter. There's just been one questionable, at best, decision after questionable decision. But here in the end, we finally see God getting kind of what he ordained in the first place, that the Israelites would have this opportunity to rise up in the person of Samson against the Philistines. So Samson owes these Philistine guys 30 garments and 30 changes of clothes. Well, he's like, well, fine. I know where I can get some. So he goes down to another Philistine city, Ashkelon. And Ashkelon, one commentator said it's not unreasonable to believe, because remember, these garments that we're talking about aren't your regular run-of-the-mill, everyday type of garments. They were special. They were fancy. So one commentator suggested that there may have been a time of feast or celebration or some sort of holiday sort of thing going on. And so Samson knew that, and he went there specifically on that day. Yeah, something like that. Samson kind of crashed the party in the most brutal way possible and kills 30 Philistines, takes their garments, and is like, okay, here's my end of the deal. Here's your 30 garments. Which is so savage. It's just, the story of Samson is just, oh my gosh. It's like, you can't make this up. This is so bizarre. It just keeps upping the ante. And so Samson, yes, he did give what he owed. To be fair, the Philistines cheated in the first place, so Samson kind of cheated in his own way. But again, he's starting to deal with the Philistines. It says, in hot anger, he went back to his father's house. So he doesn't even fully consummate the marriage. He leaves before the wedding feast is over. He says, forget this. My wife betrayed me. You guys cheated. I don't even know why I considered this in the first place. And just checks out and goes back to his hometown. And then Samson's wife was given to his companion, one of the 30 men. This would have was the man, because remember, these 30 guys were Philistines. This is the one whom Samson honored the most. He gave the most honor to at the beginning of the feast. He said, "Hey, you're going to be like my top guy." And so Samson's wife is given to this guy in the absence of Samson. And that's how the chapter ends. Now, we're not completely done with this story. There's still a little bit more to play out. We're not done with the girl, Samson's nearly wife, or this town. But that's the end of the chapter, so we're going to pause there, and we'll pick it up next. What on earth do we take from this? God is greater than really bad decisions. Very true. I've got to be completely fair to the Philistine woman. She was caught between a rock and a rock. But still, the whole thing never should have come about because Samson should never have decided to marry a Philistine. Don't make really bad decisions. True. We learned a riddle. Congratulations. Yep. Now you can go play with Gollum. I'll give you something from my personal life. This afternoon when I was going over this, at work actually, I had some very interesting, kind of random and pointed conversations. Not pointed at me, just conversations with customers in passing. I met one woman who was looking to get a specific like kids book for her son, who's like my age, but he lives up in New York, and he's like really well off, got a six-figure job, lives in Brooklyn, got his own apartment, all this stuff, but he's reached a point in his life where he's like, what comes now? What's next? And just talking with other people. This is a customer I spoke to at work. Just random lady. Didn't get her name. But she said her son, he's just at this stage where he's like, I don't know what comes next in life. I feel like I've attained everything. Now what? And just through other things, reading and studying and just talking with people, God really got me thinking about misplaced priorities. And so much of this comes back to what was prophesied by the 13, when Samson's parents were told that he would begin to save the Israelites from the hand of the Philistines. Imagine what God could have done with Samson if his priorities had been right. Imagine if he had focused more on his Nazarite vow, if he had been willing to honor God in his choices and his actions, if he had honored his parents in their recognition that he should. Now, God squeezed something good out of it at the end. Absolutely. And greater things are going to come. But when your priorities are off, our own choices can sometimes or oftentimes undermine what God would love to do with us. Because Samson was a judge, and he did begin to deal with the Philistines, but it wasn't until a later man was much more dedicated to God that the Philistines were truly dealt with. Wasn't until the time of Samson and King David that the Philistines really were dealt with. Samuel, a high priest who was avowed to God, much like Samson was, but was one who honored that. And then David, I don't have to tell you that David was a man after God's own heart. We see tremendous victories in the lives of those men because they chose to have the right priorities. They honored God with those. And as a result, they are remembered as tremendous leaders that secured overwhelming victories for their people. And so I've really been thinking about that, just looking at the life of Samson and wondering, yes, Samson is mentioned in the Hall of Faith. Absolutely. And he did tremendous things. But he was such a deeply flawed character, and you can't help but wonder, what more could we have said about him had he been more faithful to God's will, what God wanted to do? That's what I see. And again, a lot of the stuff that you see here, this is just a precursor. A lot of Samson's decisions that he makes in this chapter, they come up again and again, and they get worse and worse. So just brace yourselves for that. I've seen a number of people typing for a minute, so I'm going to let you guys go ahead and throw in your input. I know it's after 10 o'clock here or wherever we're at. Gotta go eat prayers. Okay. Have a good night, Bob. Thanks for coming.